so in covenant in the Old Testament, they would cut these animals, and Darren, would you do me a favor? Just stand on the other end, and he's going to represent my covenant partner. And so what would happen is that when we had this, the ceremony would ensue. What would happen is that both parties in covenant would pass through the sacrifice. And their passing through was a covenant which said basically that if I break this covenant, be it unto me as it is these animals. Meaning that if I break covenant with you because blood has been shed, then what has happened to these animals should happen to me. And so it was a serious deal. And so it meant that he had obligations and I had obligations. And this covenant was conditioned upon us continuing to pass through and meeting our obligations. And so this was sort of the ceremony and the sign and the ceremony of a league being made, of a treaty being made, of an agreement being made. And so, thank you, brother. And so what would happen is that in that process, it would be done before God and before witnesses, and everybody knew that those people were in covenant. Very strangely, though, is you're looking in Genesis 15, God makes covenant with Abraham, and he does exactly what the leagues of nations would do. He does exactly what would typically be done in Eastern religion, is that animals would be shed, blood would be shed, but something very significantly different occurs when Abram cuts covenant, or when God cuts covenant with Abram. Instead of Abram standing on the other side and God standing on the one side, God literally makes sure that Abraham is asleep and seated and resting. And he himself passes through the parts. All by himself. And that's powerful in and of itself, because what it says is that Abram, I'm making a covenant with you. I'm making here's the word I want you to understand about covenant. I'm making a promise with you that is not conditioned on your ability to perform it. That the fact of the matter is, because I'm God, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do what you can't do. Why? Because the fact of the matter is, right, God tells Abram that you're going to be the father of many nations, that I'm going to make you great, and I'm going to produce seed through your body with your wife. And the fact of the matter is, Abram, you can't get it accomplished anyway, can you? I mean, you know, he got to do the deal, right? I mean, he got to go in the tent, but, you know, that's the fun part. He's got to go into the tent, but he can't, even by going into the tent, he can't produce seed. And so God is teaching us something in this text about promises and how he deals with and operates as it relates to covenant. And this was an eternal covenant. And, you know, I mean, you can talk about some of the things that Abram had to do throughout the process, but the truth of the matter is that most scholars will tell you that this is the classic definition of unconditional covenant. I mean, Abraham, of course, obeyed God, and he had to release his faith. But God was going to do what he needed to do and prove to Abram that he was big enough to accomplish both ends of it. That he was big enough and bad enough and God enough to swear by himself, because there's no greater in the earth that he could swear by. Now, I can promise you something, Now, we swear to God that we're going, yeah, all right. But the truth of the matter is that when God makes a promise, he can only look to himself. He's self-accountable.